A very warm welcome to This World Game Changers podcast, where your host, Paul D. Lowe, embraces many crucial conversations that compassionately contribute towards creating a better life and world. Paul's intention is very simple: to help get people's inspirational insights and motivational messages out into the world so others may benefit.
Hello listeners, and welcome back to this World Game Changers podcast episode. Today I'm very pleased to say a returning guest and a fellow World Game Changers director, Rebecca Wheele, all the way down from sunny south of England. Rebecca, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Listeners, I don't know about you, if you've had a chance to listen to the previous podcast that Rebecca and I did. In fact, we've done several previous podcast episodes, but the one in particular, being immersed in the present moment, what a gift. And I think it's fair to say, Rebecca, is it not? I certainly don't want to try and put words in your mouth, that had quite a profound effect on both of us after the reflection of actually having that conversation, that dance, that we decided we'd build on that and see where it took us for a second time. Is that a fair comment, a fair starting point?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a really great example of being in the moment, doing the podcast. And there's lots that we can dive into, I think, with this, so it's really good that we can do a series. Is that what it's called? Series?
Mini-series, series, whatever we can call it. We can call it a pink elephant if we need to. What do you think it was that made that so special for us?
It's interesting because I was thinking about the previous podcast, and I haven't listened to it yet. I haven't listened to it since we recorded it, and I actually can't remember, or I don't know what we even talked about, which is interesting because that's kind of an indication of that pure immersion of being in the moment, in a sense. So perhaps that was a part of it. Perhaps we were exploring uncharted waters, new territory. I think that's always something that is really interesting in a conversation where you're kind of dancing around different ideas in the moment. What about you? What do you feel since that? Have you reflected on with it?
Well, like you, I haven't actually listened to the episode, but this is not about remembering what was said. It was just that afterglow of, wow, what just happened there? You remember that off-air conversation we had around what just happened there? Listeners, it was magical. And I don't want to kind of just wax lyrical about the conversation or the conversations that Rebecca and I may share and the reflections. What I really want to do is highlight the truth of the matter is, isn't it true that we all, to varying degrees, have these kind of conversations, even with what the outside world might label as strangers? How many times have you come across somebody, and I use this proverbial, the little old lady at the bus stop, the old gentleman in the bank queue, or whatever it is, and you strike up a conversation, and then you go, when you've parted company, you reflect and think, wow, where did that come from? So, like I say, I haven't listened to the recording, but it was that afterglow, and what made it so special? I think it was literally that uncertainty, which actually is quite challenging because, isn't it true, generally, yet again, as humans, we crave certainty. We want to know what's happening. We want to control the situation, even if, listeners, we're not quite prepared to admit that. No, I'm not a control freak. I mean, ironically, I've had this conversation with a lot of people and they've gone at great lengths to convince me they're not a control freak. They're telling me I am not a control freak. I think you're missing the point here. By the mere fact that you're trying to convince me over and over and over again, actually just proves the point.
Yeah. Well, I suppose we're not one or the other, really, because we're always changing and evolving and shifting. So in some moments that need for control can be more than in other moments. So it's interesting, that idea around, people's reactions, labeling themselves as, I am this or I am that. I find that quite curious, because I notice that a lot, with people, and even with myself, at times, kind of identifying as a certain type of person. And we constrict ourselves when we do that, because we've always, the moment is just always all we have. So when we always have a choice, firstly, in the moment, and we're always changing and shifting. So any thoughts around that at all?
We are. I've put a caveat on that, if we have the awareness of what's going on around us, because from my experience, my perceptions, my understanding, call it what you will, we are creatures of habit, humans, and I'm talking generally now. We're creatures of habit, and to use a well-known cliche, we don't know what we don't know. So life happens. If we haven't got that awareness to change things, and the fact that we can actually, we can let life happen through us rather than to us. But that's a question of awareness, and that's self-acceptance. And I'm not saying that's a 5-minute overnight. So it's a nice fancy theory. And it's almost real sort of snazzy words. Oh, great! Let life happen through us rather than to us. I like the sound of that. Try implementing it. And there's inner work involved in this. So for me, yes, this kind of truth in what you're saying around that change, that evolvement, but we have to be aware of that. If we're going to go on a journey, we need to be aware what our starting point is and where our intended journey is going to lead us, and be prepared to take those life-enhancing, changing steps. So I don't think it's quite as simple as, well, I mean, the truth of the matter is, yes, we have choices. We all have choices. But do we know we have choices?
Yeah, so it's wrapped up in the awareness. Well, it all starts from the awareness, really, doesn't it? And
everything. Yeah. So, and this is why personally, Rebecca, I love these kind of conversations, these dancers, as I call them, because there isn't a right or wrong. There's going to be listeners tuning in on this that are going to lean more towards what you're saying. There's going to be those that are listening that lean more towards what I'm saying. And that it doesn't matter, what the the degrees. There isn't a right or wrong in this, as we know. But it's conversations like this that raise awareness. Or if we can plant a seed for thought-provoking, that was interesting. Didn't really get what he or she was saying. I need to look a bit further on that. And that, we've coined the phrase from Richard Gerver many times, that childlike curiosity. I wonder what's really underneath the surface there. But there again, when we go back to the 6 human needs model, a la Tony Robbins, listeners have spoke about this so many times. When you look at us as humans, we are creatures of habit. And how many times have you heard that old saying, better the devil you know, stick to what you know best? What that really is saying is control the situation and be trapped in fear. That's my definition of what's really being said there. And I say that with the utmost love and respect, because I've spent decades in that space.
So do you find, or is there an angle where we can look at control in a positive way? Are there any kind of positives to control? What would you say around that?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. I'm not saying control and certainty is a bad thing. Like everything else, it's balance, isn't it? It's a bit like riding a bike. We need some momentum in our life to create balance. We can't just sit on a bike. Maybe if we're some kind of super duper gymnast and we've got that amazing balance, yeah, probably we could just sit on a bike and not go anywhere and just maintain that equilibrium. I personally don't know anybody that can do that either literally or even metaphorically. We're not built that way as humans. We're just not built that way. And that's part of the rich experience, listeners, isn't it? That, the tears, the elation, the joy, the despair, everything that we experience as humans, to know that that doesn't define us. It's just that, an experience. So to go back to your question, Rebecca, if I can be allowed to paraphrase, is control and certainty a bad thing? No, it's not. But the big question, I suppose, that underpins that is it serving us?
Yeah, definitely.
Let me use the example, if I will. Okay, so somebody's standing outside of us literally with a gun to our head. At that moment in time, we've got no control. And when we talk about the 6 human needs, that stranger that may be trying to rob us and has put a gun or a knife to us, they are become the most significant person in our life at that moment in time. Because our life is in that stranger's hands. The trick is to take back that control. Diffuse the situation, disarm, and deflect it. So that's actually, in that sense, control is it's a self-empowering thing. And that's the big question I feel that we must always be checking in with ourselves. What have I just said there? What have I just done there? Is that serving me? Is it serving the person I've been dancing with? And they're taking the learning out of that.
Yeah, it comes back to the awareness again, doesn't it? Because as you say, control we can use as something if it's serving us, but having the awareness to know, what's underneath the surface of that control, because it always comes from somewhere, and understanding or having the awareness around where it's coming from and why can really help us to kind of navigate, because then we can understand if it's helping us or not.
Yeah, there's an old, I'm trying to recall this, listeners, from a muse I've seen in the past, and it's something around ships and boats in harbours. They look really nice, but ships are not meant to be in harbours. They're meant to sail, to leave the shore, to go in life's stormy seas. I think that's a great metaphor for humans as humans, because we tend to play safe. We stick to what we know best. We don't want to break through glass ceilings because it's unknown territory. And all the conditioning that we've had, be it from wherever, and it usually comes from our parents for obvious reasons. They are, or should I say our guardians or our carers, from an early age. These are the people we look to nurture us, to guide us with the best intentions, which I think mainly, certainly from my experience, it is done with a good intention. But isn't it true that senior influence, that significant influence in our life, only really guides us from a place of their knowing and their understanding? They're doing the best job that they can based on what they was taught. It doesn't make it right, it doesn't make it wrong, it makes it a case of, well, I'm passing on the lessons I've learnt. And of course, so, we progress in life and we take the good bits out and leave the not so good bits, or the perceived not so good bits, behind.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of awareness and that choice around, I guess you get to a certain stage in life where, everything that you've learned, or even with school as well, it's all your responsibility at the end of the day. Because I think that we can kind of go through life, often there's a tendency to put the blame outside of us, isn't there? I've only ever known it this way, or this is how I was brought up, so this is why I'm XYZ. Really taking that back, in a sense, this is one of an example of the good examples of control. When you take back that control, is taking responsibility for yourself rather than the kind of putting the blame out there on the external.
Yeah, and I think yet again, not to labour the point, but it's a question of balance, because I certainly went through a phase of, I think when you've endured great trauma and challenges in your life, and I certainly did this, my need for certainty was beyond certain. I wanted and needed is a better word rather than wanted. Wanted is superficial. I needed to take back control of my life because of what happened in my earlier years.
Yeah.
I felt everything had been stripped away from me. Boy, was I going to I wasn't aware that I was taking it back. This is only as I've, worked through it over the years that I understand now what was happening. But I wanted to control everything. And what that was really saying is, please don't hurt me anymore. Please don't take me into vulnerable places that's going to destroy me, because I've nearly been destroyed over and over and over again, and I can't take any more. So the best way for me to do that is actually for me to control, or I think I'm controlling everything. The actual paradox is I was controlling absolutely nothing and making my world a bit darker.
Yeah. And I suppose to varying degrees, each individual has their, experiences with the pain or suffering in their life, and trying to escape from that or run away from that, by or control it, I guess, is control not experiencing that again. It kind of can get out of control by how that manifests then in your life without that awareness.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is part of controlling is actually letting go.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds so ridiculous but it is. I've mentioned time and time again, and no apologies for repeating, because I think it's such a simple but profound lesson, that if we can learn those three important immortal words and practice them. And I remember having this conversation with Jim Britt, a former mentor of mine, the guy that was Tony Robbins' mentor, Jim Britt. This guy knew one or two things about life and personal development. And having a conversation with Jim one day, and he was like a wise old mentor, very gentle, just gentle prodding and poking. And he said to me, what's the three most important, most spoken words, most powerful words in the world, Paul? And I naturally just responded, I love you. And he said, thank you for that compliment, Paul, but no. and like all good mentors, he'll keep you guessing and he'll keep you hanging around, anchoring it in rather than just giving you the sort of immediate answer.
Sure.
So he kept me going for what seemed like a lifetime. It was probably only about 30 seconds or a minute. And those immortal words, listeners, let it go. And what is that, Rebecca, if not living in the moment? Whatever we spoke about 10 seconds ago, I don't even know what we spoke about. I've let it go. Because, and it wouldn't be something bad between us because you and I don't dance that way. But imagine we're strangers and we've just had heated words because, whatever, you've bumped into my car or whatever it is, that kind of thing. I don't know why that made you laugh, but maybe that's a private conversation. But, there again, listeners, look at that spark of humour out of a totally ridiculous, innocuous comment. But it sparked humour and sort of light-heartedness. But Rebecca made her laugh by the fact it's made her laugh, it's made me laugh. And that's the joy of being in the moment. What did I say about a minute ago when I said I couldn't even remember what I said a minute ago? I don't know. Because it doesn't matter, it's gone. In other words, I've let it go.
Yes. And when you live that way, you feel light and free, because we carry so much baggage, don't we? If we don't do that, and if we hold on to, our mind wanders to this thing that happened yesterday, and we keep going back to it, or thing that happened a week ago, and we kind of think we can get stuck there, and then we can take that on as baggage if we don't let it go. And there's such a lightness to be experienced in life by letting go, and just I think that is such the key part of being in the moment, isn't it? Because in the moment is right now, and everything else is only ever existing in our heads, because the future and the past, we're never at the future and the past. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but
and it doesn't matter, does it? It absolutely doesn't matter, listeners, because how many times it's like when we listen, do we listen to answer, or do we listen to be present?
Yeah.
We listen to answer.
Yeah.
Where was you going with that, Rebecca? I don't know. I don't care, because it doesn't matter. The point is, we've danced. That's the point for us all as human beings. Learning to dance with each other, learning to love each other, learning to accept each other, learning to forgive each other. But that starts with us. Because how can I be like that with you if I'm not like it with myself?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it all has a certain degree of attachment to the self. Any situation in life that happens is kind of a situation, like it can show you where you're not free, or where you're attached to some story or some something, that comes, always kind of circles back. There's always a degree of the self in there, isn't there, in any kind of like situation like that?
Always. And that projection and that conditioning and all the stuff that we've learnt over the years. And that's a constant pruning exercise for us to keep checking in with ourselves. And we do get caught in that past, and, and then that reminder of, hang on, this is not really who I am. But we do get caught on that hamster's wheel, because you know why, listeners? We've always done it that way, and we're always going to carry on doing it that way. Better the devil, you want to be careful of change, and then it brings in all the, nice girls shouldn't do things like that. Big boys don't cry. All rich people are crooks, and so we've become part of that story and that script, rather than, hang on, I don't actually want to read that script. Do you know what I want to do as an individual? I want to create my own. I want to create a fantasy story, because that's all it is. The reality is the reality of this moment here and now. The rest is just stuff. Yes, there are experiences that's happened in the past, which we can take the learning from, but it's just an experience. And I say just, and I'm going to take ownership of this, listeners, the risk of being insensitive to anyone's plight or whatever that may have been. If I could be slightly self-indulgent and take ownership and say, of my past, which was dark, which was desperate, yes, and there was an addiction in there, and there was suicide attempts in there, and there was all kinds of weird and wonderful stuff in there. But you know what? They were experiences. They were clouds in the sky that come and go. And some of the times in the sky was the sunshine. But as beautiful as that was, that come and went as well. The only constant was me. I have a choice. I have a choice how I see that. Is it cloudy every day? Or is the world a beautiful place, and behind those clouds is a beautiful blue sky? Yeah.
That's interesting what you say about the only constant, because, the thing that never changes within us is our true self, is our true essence, our soul. Everything else that changes and shifts and dies and comes and goes, it's not actually us. It's not actually who we are. So, I think that's really a good point about, that thing that never changes, which is our true core essence, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. We are the sky. We're infinite, we're endless, and experiences, brackets clouds, brackets sunshine, come and go. You know, we have tears, rain, call it what you will, but we are that eternal, infinite sky. That is it. The rest is experience. But there again, Rebecca, to take us right back to what we spoke about at the top of this beautiful dance, was unless we've got the awareness to embrace that, it makes no sense. It becomes a load of fancy theory. And where I challenge that from my own point of view, with everything I've been through in my life, is this fancy theory has not only kept me alive, but it's got me through a stage where I've progressed to enjoy a fulfilling, beautiful life now. Is it perfect? Well, I don't even know what perfection is. I don't know what perfection is. But I know I've got a beautiful world and a beautiful life and some amazing people and some deeply, deeply... Words fail. But just let's use the common term, very good relationships.
Yeah.
Any thoughts as we begin to wrap up?
There's another word that you mentioned, which kind of landed with me, was reminders, and I just feel that that's so important as well in the awareness, because you know, each day we wake up and it's just having that reminder about the you know, what we've been speaking about, the awareness, and the true essence of ourselves, and keeping the reminders always present in our lives is important. Touch on what you've just said now about the relationships, because everything in life as well is a relationship, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's also something that's good to be aware of, and you know, not just relationship with others, relationship with self, relationship with everything, really. Yeah,
literally everything. And for me, and this is only my own model of the world, and I'm not saying it's right, I never tell anyone, Rebecca, what's right and what's wrong. The one that would be extremely arrogant and egotistical. But what I like to do is have conversations like this and challenge each other and prod and poke and say, well, that's an interesting sort of model of the world you've got. Tell me more about that. And can I be allowed to share this, which is how I see it? And that for me is growth. And yes, sometimes there might be tears and tantrums within those kinds of conversations, but they're growing pains.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that mirror again, isn't it? To kind of reveal everything in life, in a sense, is a mirror. Every situation is an opportunity for us to see, you know, see ourselves, and how we're being and what story we're telling ourselves. And so, yeah, it's not always, you know, the tough love can come into it, and but truth is so important, isn't it, in this, because we can get so caught up in our story sometimes and believing that that's our truth, when actually it's an illusion. So having you know, that mirror, or people in your life that you can have these dances with, these reflections with, is so important in that growth journey. So yeah.
You mentioned an interesting word there, and I want to conclude this one, Rebecca, where I respectfully suggest we might have a follow-on episode. And the simple word is trust, because we're back to that word certainty. If I put all my trust in another person, am I giving my control away? That's a scary place to be. Just hold that thought, and maybe we can cogitate on that, listeners, Rebecca and I. Maybe Rebecca and I might have another dance around that, this whole thing of control and trust and letting other people be, to use a Rebeccaism, a mirror for us. And we might not, when we're naked, metaphorically, we might not like what we see. But what are we going to do with that? We're going to turn on the person that's put that mirror in front of us and lash out at them. Just hold that thought. Rebecca, as I alluded to at the top of this yet again beautiful dance, you know, as you know, You don't need me to tell you this. Maybe you need a reminder that you are a WGC director. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't. But as your role as such, doing amazing things, just share with us some of the ways that listeners can find out more about WGC, some of the platforms and all that kind of thing.
Sure. So the best way to find out more about WGC, well, there's lots of ways, but really the website is the main kind of hub, if you like. So worldgamechangers.org is the website address, and we can put it in the links below. So we've got lots of information about World Game Changers on there. We've got links to the books, links to the podcast, many resources for people to check out. And we've recently started developing the podcast with a YouTube channel as well. So check us out on YouTube. And if you can subscribe, that would be really, really appreciated. We'd love to have your support. And if you can like and comment on any podcast, that would also be really greatly appreciated. So yeah, there's many different avenues and kind of resources for everyone to have to discover.
So there you have it, listeners. Rebecca and I dancing again around being immersed in the present moment. What a gift. I'll leave you to reflect upon it, and I'm sure Rebecca and I will have some interesting dialogue off air, but hopefully not half as interesting as the next one we do on air. So keep tuned, and I'll leave you with this thought, as I always do when we sign off. Remember, the world's changing. How will you respond?
Thanks very much for listening to this World Game Changers podcast episode. Hopefully you found it interesting and helpful. Drop a line to Paul at worldgamechangers.org with any thoughts or questions you may have, and he'll be more than happy to respond. Remember, the world's changing. How will you respond?